A topic that may cause some emotions when you hear about it. Should counselling students pay for a placement?
This is really hard to talk about, and it's a topic that came up in our Facebook group. Someone posted that they'd applied for a placement, which, as we know, can be hard to get, and they were told they'd have to pay. And there was a long conversation along the lines of, don't we pay enough? Don't we give enough as students to get our qualifications? One of the people who posted was literally at the end of the road with it. He said, I just haven't got any more money. And the fact of the matter is that I learnt a lesson when I started as a placement counsellor in my student times. And when I qualified, I was asked to stay on and become a board member of the organisation. And I remember having a conversation with the then manager, the CEO, and he said to me, Rory, on the face of it, we're a really fluffy organisation and we like to look after people and help them out. He said, but the reality is we're a business. And a few years later, I ended up being the chair and director of the organisation. And the things I learned was that charities are reliant on either public donations or someone who gives them a lot of money, a benefactor, or they're funded by the government. And the people who give you the funding, they'll give you money, but you have a contract. And that contract tells you what you can spend the money on, because a lot of charities are arms of the state. You're taking state money and they give you a contract. And in that contract, I was absolutely surprised that a very small portion of that money was allocated to counselling. There were lots of other tranches of money that were allocated to assessment or reporting or other activities, but counselling wasn't particularly well funded. And the counselling manager had to take the money, she had to pay her own salary, and then what was left, then try and use it to support the counselling part of the operation. And that looked like at one point we got £10 for every supervision, we got a £10 contribution, we got a sandwich for lunch if we stayed more than so many hours, and she would work really hard to get us free CPD. People would come in and give us CPD. That's how it is. And that's the reality of it. When people say charities don't care about counselling and are exploiting therapists, it's not the charity. The charity has to work to a contract. And talking to friends of mine who still work in the charitable sector, that stream of money has for a long time become less and less. If you're running a charity, you can employ people to do a multitude of jobs. But when you're running a counselling service, you have to have a clinical lead, because a clinical lead is someone who's qualified and will look at the clients, assess them, and then allocate them to students. And the truth of the matter is, clinical leads aren't cheap. And a lot of the clinical leads, I know, don't work for what they're worth. They're worth a lot more, but they usually take up most of the budget, because that's how it works. The idea is that the clinical lead will be paid from the budget, and then the students work pro bono. They work for free to acquire their hours. But even that budget now is being cut. So as a consequence of that, to employ a clinical lead, where does the money come from? And I suspect in some cases, but not all, the donation for the training goes towards employing someone who can triage. It's a rubbish situation, Ken, absolutely rubbish. But yeah, I'm afraid it's where we're at this point.
It is. And I appreciate that you're weighing in on what it might look like behind that. And what I've heard you say there and share from your experience and seeing the other side of charity and what is required in that is that maybe if they are charging money, they're not doing it to profit. They're doing it to cover the costs to be able to deliver that service. I think it's broken. That's my feeling, is that the system is broken. And you spoke about funding, and I know it all too well. I worked in a job where I was in communication with the commissioners. We had a bid writer on our team that was writing the bids to win those contracts with the commissioners. And here's the way that it actually works. There is a requirement that you match their criteria to even get a shout in on the bid. And as you say, Rory, the money has been cut and cut. And I think it's a sign of a broken system where the funds are not maybe allocated correctly. I think it needs a refresh, definitely. And I think it's sad for me, and this is just my own personal feelings. I'm speaking for me, Ken Kelly, practitioner. I think it's sad because it puts that pressure on the student to pay in those circumstances where a student decides they are going to take that placement where they're paying in. And I think that it puts the biggest strain at service level, where there are people that are getting shorter term than they should and not getting the care that we know we can give because the funding system doesn't allow for that. And let's hope that our ethical bodies and professional standards can work towards making that known. And I know they are. They're doing an incredible job. I know, Rory, you're connected at the very top levels of those, the movers and the shakers, and they're always presenting to Parliament and trying to make us seen and doing some great work there.
If you are in that position of having to pay for a placement, then, having a look at what your fee is going to get you. And before I wrap up, I'd just like to say thank you to all those people who work in the charitable sector. It's underpraised work in my view, and you do a fantastic job. And I speak as someone whose family has benefited from those people who work for free. As someone said to me, volunteering is the oil that oils the wheels of society. And I think that's very true.